Do you think that Kanna is nature's MDMA?
I think it's one of the closest things. It is something that helps to pool serotonin. It really works on a biochemical level to just really keep those good hormones flowing around, but it's gentle enough so you don't have to worry about things like serotonin syndrome.
I was actually looking at the research on this. South African hunter-gatherers used this substance in prehistoric times. The first written account of the plant was in 1662. That's some old school wisdom. What is your fascination with Kanna?
The Khoikhoi tribe was trading this to the Dutch. They're like, what can we trade? What is the most valuable to us? In that time, they traded sheep and they traded Kanna.
The shift that we're all looking for, it comes from within. It comes from our decision to actually take an honest look at what's causing us the depression and anxiety in the first place. Sometimes it can be so powerful to have this external locus of control, whether it be an adaptogen or a supplement like Kanna, to actually give us some insight as to what life would even feel like without the constant barrage of anxiety and depression, so we can make a better choice from that space. Bandit, welcome to Wellness and Wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
We just started some breath work because of the technical difficulties, but guess what, you guys? I'm so excited. This is episode 500 shows on the Wellness and Wisdom podcast. We're doing a huge giveaway. One of our partners is Bandit's company, LiftMode. Today, we're talking about all this suite of products and specifically Kanna, this incredible product that I've been trying for about 45 days or so now. It's been awesome. We're going to unpack how it can actually help us when we look at anxiety and depression. But Bandit, thank you so much for your partnership. It's pretty rare that I partner with companies. When it came to LiftMode, it was an easy yes. For people that don't know, just on a 30,000 foot view, Bandit, tell us a little bit about LiftMode and how it relates to giving people greater ease, greater peace in their nervous system and in their body, just on a really high level.
Yeah, LiftMode is is the brainchild of we had Armand and Marek, who are our directors, and they are biochemists. They are just sometimes I feel humbled to be in those conversations with them because they're speaking such high level organic chemistry that sometimes I'm like taking notes, so they are so passionate about it, and they're really interested in developing things that help people to live better, to feel better, and to just like, they get into the nootropics area as well. So they're really interested in bringing things to the market that are a little bit more novel, kind of, pushing the envelope a little bit, having things that other people don't have, and things that just really allow people to just push cognition, push memory, push human performance to the maximum, and keeping it as natural as possible. Everything we make, it comes with a little package, and, you'll open that up and you'll find one of the first things you see is a COA. The one thing we are absolutely hardcore on is anytime we get a raw material in, we send it to a third-party independent lab for testing, so HPLC testing. In some cases, like for the Kanna, which I am thrilled that you got a chance to try.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
The alkaloids in Kanna are very hard to detect. So, the lab we use is actually we get this stuff from South Africa, directly picked from South Africa, where it just grows, wonderfully over there. And we end up getting it all the way from South Africa to the US. We check it, we do a couple of quality tests, and then we send it all the way back to a university that does specialized testing for us. So we can find out, exactly how many, exactly the level of alkaloids in it. And because it's so hard to detect, we also send that to another lab in the US. So that we can compare and contrast those. We report everything, kind of the median between those two labs. Sometimes it can spike a little bit. Sometimes it can come in a little low, and we're like, that doesn't seem about right. So we always double lab test it, always independent lab testing.
Yeah, we can't perform well unless we're in a state of ease or really homeostasis. We have to be centered in our biology. And when I looked at the scalicium and the mesembrine and all the different things that we're going to talk about today in the actual Kanna itself, and also in the Mood Lift product and in the Neuro Lift. There's a really cool amalgam of ancient wisdom in here, and this is what I was so excited about. I was looking at our editorial calendar. We plan shows like months out, and it just so happened. Honestly, I feel like in Divine Intervention, I feel like this was really the perfect timing for us to talk about anxiety and depression, and using natural remedies, natural herbs that are found in these really beautiful places in the world like Africa. And I'm sure you can tell us about the history of where the shrub is grown, how natural it is. In some of my research, this is the part that was really cool. I was actually looking at the research on this. South African hunter-gatherers used this substance in prehistoric times. And it was actually the first written account of the plant was in 1662 by Jan van Riebeck. A traditionally prepared dried scalicium was often chewed and the saliva swallowed, but it's also made its way into gel caps, tears, and tinctures, snuffed and smoked. 1662. I mean, that's some seriously... That's some old school wisdom. Let's go on a high level as we unroll the conversation. I know that you're a scientist in your heart, and you're also a marketer, and you also wear many hats at the company. But tell us on a really high level, what is your fascination with Kanna and with the scalicium?
You get some pharmaceuticals, you get some products out there, and they're like, this has been long tested. You're looking at 20 years for pharmaceutical trials. We're talking, as you say, 1662. It was the first trade. The Khoikhoi tribe was trading this to the Dutch. They're like, what can we trade? What is the most valuable to us? In that time, they traded sheep and they traded Kanna. And, there's actually another name for this. It's like Kagoed, and it just literally means good chewing. So this is like a little African shrub that, people were just pulling straight out of the earth and chewing on. And it's worth noting that these were hunter-gatherers. These were African tribes that are famous for running for days on end after prey, and you get hungry. It's easy for your mood to dip. When everybody gets hangry, right? But one of the amazing things is that they were chewing this to keep them energized, to keep them positive and focused on it, enhancing cognition as well. A lot of people are going out there. We've got people on Wall Street that are using a little bit of Kanna just to kind of keep it, like, it gives you a little bit of energy. It gives you that drive. It keeps you feeling optimistic about what you're doing. So, I mean, you've got hundreds of years of use of this. So, yes. That really says something. There are some companies that are doing research of this for its potential as just a minor appetite suppressant as well. I think there are a lot of products out there, even natural ones. I don't want to speak poorly of too many other products out there, but let's think of something that people take for depression, like St. John's wort. I think St. John's wort is fantastic, but even as a natural product, you've got to take it seriously. That's something that, you take for a few months on end before you really start coming into that effective period for it. And, even with the most natural of things, you've got to be careful when you taper off this kind of stuff, because you get rebound effects. You can have rebound depression. When you say this kind of stuff, what do you mean by that? This kind of stuff? Specifically like St. John's wort, for example, which is a really popular one people take for depression. But some people get, light sensitivity, and it's something that you've got to really take seriously, even though it's a natural product. Whereas Kanna is one of these things where, if you are using the powder sublingually, you're using like a liquid, like one of our elixirs that we flavor. You can add it to drinks even. This is something you can feel within 10 minutes. Yes. I feel it within 5 minutes. I know everyone's thumbprint is unique, so there'll never be another Bandit thumbprint or Josh thumbprint, and the same thing on the inside. And I'm even thinking and feeling about the people with us here in audio and video that are actually dealing with the occasional, or maybe not the occasional, the all the time anxiety and depression. And I'm really sensing for them and for me, the shift that we're all looking for, it comes from within. It comes from our decision to actually take an honest look at what's causing us the depression and anxiety in the first place. But sometimes, and I want to know what you feel about this, sometimes it can be so powerful to have this external locus of control, whether it be an adaptogen or a supplement like Kanna, to actually give us some insight as to what life would even feel like without the constant barrage
of anxiety and depression, so we can make a better choice from that space. Have your users reported this? Have you felt this? What I'm talking about, just this break from the incessancy of the anxiety and depression, the focus on the rumination of the past or the focus on anxiety in the future. Have you yourself felt this? Have your customers talked about this with Kanna? Because I'll tell you what, we felt it. I did a ceremony with this with Carrie. I can't believe that the FDA and USDA haven't come down from the mountains and tried to make this illegal. It's so powerful. It's so beautiful. It literally feels like a plant medicine ceremony, but it's totally safe and totally legal. What are your thoughts on that personally and also with your customer base?
Yeah, I mean, I love being in the lab and I love developing products, but what gets me up in the morning is, going on Reddit, looking at our customer reviews, reading the emails that we're getting from customers and how life-changing this stuff can be, And what's really interesting with Kanna in particular is that depending on the dosage, like this stuff is active at as low as 15 to 20 milligrams, because that's the strength of the stuff we have. But the experience someone can have on 20 milligrams versus 50 milligrams, there's such a wide variety of applications you can have. So, like for example, I know a lot of people who like to use it recreationally as like a social lubricant or an alcohol alternative. Something that they go out and they're like, no, I'm not drinking tonight, but I'm going to get into the conversation. I'm going to feel confident. I'm going to be my best self. That's why we make the liquids. You can add it to drinks and sort of just have a healthy night out. Whereas, some people go for the highest strength and that euphoria, they get that kind of entheogen, changing my consciousness type of thing, really getting that kind of maximum positivity. So there is a real range of experiences we get, and it is always positive, which is fantastic.
How about you personally, Bandit? What's been your own experience? You started out as a customer, which is amazing, plus 3 years ago.
Yeah, way back.
And then
now,
you got into the formulations and now you actually work for the company. So if it was good enough for you as a customer that attracted you so much, that made you actually join the company, what was that in your heart? What did you feel? Why did you join the company? You must have felt very strongly about these products.
Oh yeah, I chased them down. I gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. It
was like the Godfather.
No, really. Yeah, exactly. What really drew me was, I started about over 10 years ago working in supplements, being a brand manager for a couple of brands in New Zealand, where I'm originally from. And I just had so much dissatisfaction with some of the brands out there. I was looking at some of these formulations, just thinking, this just doesn't make sense. Like you have some ingredients in there that are actually countering each other, or ingredients that don't standardize, that don't actually test anything. And when you get a natural ingredient, kind of being one of them, if you get, any botanical extract, you are completely kind of at the mercy of the growing season. How well that was handled. How long did they take before they harvested that and they actually dried it out? What techniques did they use? And I was so unhappy with them. And I was just always looking for a brand. And I found myself buying LiftMode products because it was just always the best on the market. So that's what drew me to the company. And then Kanna actually came a little bit later in our development process. We were so thrilled to find something like this. And we ended up having to, it was a process going through a lot of different suppliers and finding the one that we thought was just the best to offer our customers. But my own personal journey with it is I've tried it at all the different levels of effect. I actually, the first time I tried it was with another guy in the company, and he loves insufflating it because actually even the tribesmen back in the day, they used to either chew it or just insufflate, as snuff.
Right, the snuff,
so I tried it that way. And I was like, okay, I can see how people appreciate this. This is a real, upper. This is an energy boost. I can feel it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't for me. And I almost gave up on it. Just because it wasn't feeling right for me. Then I looked at some more of the research on which of the alkaloids worked for different reasons. You got Mesembrine, which is the energizing one, and you've got Mesembrine, which is more the calming one. And I was like, okay, let's try some more on that spectrum. Let's try a lower dosage. And I ended up trying it on a day-to-day basis, a slightly lower dosage one. And I found that it was was a completely different experience. It was calming. It still lifted my mood up. It seemed to stabilize my mood. And then I was like, okay, I can see that there is real potential here for a number of different kinds of customers.
I think it's fascinating because so many of the things out there, even if you look at ketamine or now Kanna, have been coming into my awareness since, I would say, the beginning of 2018, maybe even the end of 2017. And it just fascinates me how the FDA and USDA are just waiting in the wings. It's almost like they know that they can't patent an African shrub because it grows naturally in nature. And that makes me both excited. They've tried. Yeah. It makes me both excited and it makes me cautious because, you and I are in a world where every single thing involving health and wellness is always attempted to be monetized. And when I look at the triangle between the pharmaceuticals, the hospitals, the insurance companies, and how everyone feeds each other, it's like a very black snake that eats its own tail on a continuous basis. I think about why I'm so excited about LiftMode and why personally I'm excited about Kanna is because of my own experience. Now, we had our 3-year anniversary. I haven't told you this yet. And we went down to the lake and we did the Kanna, the powder. And I felt an incredibly large heart opening experience. It was very, very similar for me to any kind of entheogen or psychedelic. It was very similar. Now, my audience knows, and if you're hearing us for the first time, I'm very cautious and very safe in the products that I recommend that are in any way altering someone's central nervous system. And I'll tell you guys that this experience, and I'll tell you too, Bandit, this experience was so beautiful for me. I ended up having my heart open. I was crying. I was talking to Carrie. She started crying, and we had a healing in the relationship. We had this beautiful healing. And I thought about, wow, if it can create this with 2 people, how could someone use this in a micro or even a macro dosing regimen so that over the course of time, 30, 60, 90, 120 days, so we're hearing this in December, what if someone started this mid-December? How could they actually feel an improvement in the symptoms of their occasional or their chronic anxiety and depression? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm first of all, it's great to hear you had that experience. Like that's, I think, in one of our earlier phone calls we were talking about. I think you were asking me, is this would you consider this an entheogen? And at first I was like, kind of questioning that because these days, technically an entheogen, can change your perception, but it's also anything that's like mood altering or cognition enhancing. You could also say it's an entheogen. So it took me a little while to think on that because I don't like to think of Kanna as much of a psychedelic per se. It's not.
It's definitely not a psychedelic.
Sometimes entheogen for some people is kind of like a tarnished term, but ultimately it does fulfill some of those. It can change your perception. It changes your mood. It changes your outlook on life. And it's really like, I would call it an entactogen, so in the same way that some people use they used to use MDMA in therapy, it's an amazing therapeutic tool. Not at all, promoting that on this podcast, but in a similar manner, if you're using this with a loved one, you're using it to open up, it's a very powerful tool like that. But going back to what you said about, something as a sort of a daily help for occasional anxiety. I mean, that's why I even have it in the background here. That's why I developed this. Like we have the Mesembrine, and the Mesembrine is something that I really developed because kind of like the pure Kanna powders, they can get a little pricey. So I'm sort of tempted to say that if you're wanting something for a daily, long-term help for calming, for reassuring, and for occasional anxiety, the Mesembrine would be the one to go for rather than the pure powder. The pure powder is you need such a small amount of that, whereas we have tailored the Mesembrine capsules to be just like right on the perfect balance of those alkaloids for daily use, so that you can raise your mood. But if you want to come off it, there's no drop. There's no massive cost involved in terms of like your serotonin, your epinephrine, I would push Mesembrine for that. I think I'm really proud of that product. We also mix that with just a little bit of inositol. So it's kind of a mood stabilizing ingredient that seems to really synergize well with it and get you that long kind of all day effect.
Do you think that Kanna is nature's MDMA?
I think it's one of the closest things. If you're having it at that slightly higher sort of recreational dose, and you're going for the pure powders that we offer, I think it's one of the closest things out there for sure.
Why is that?
Well, to get into the technical side of it, it is a PDE4 inhibitor, and it has very similar effects to something like an SSRI, so a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it is something that helps to pool serotonin, and it really works on a like a biochemical level to just really keep those good hormones flowing around. But it's gentle enough so you don't have to worry about things like serotonin syndrome, which you can get with, the recreationals or even some of the stronger pharmaceutical options out there.
So looking at the way that this is very similar scientifically to MDMA, one thing that was fascinating to me was I was looking at this PubMed study, the National Library of Medicine. It was actually PubMed Central, and it said acute effects of the tortisum, the dual 5-HT reuptake and PDE4 inhibitor in the human amygdala and its connection to the hypothalamus. This was really interesting to me. It said the results demonstrate for the first time the attenuating effects of Kanna on the threat circuitry of the human brain, provides supporting evidence this might have anxiolytic potential, calming potential, attenuating subcortical threat responsivity. So basically, this was proved through a private cohort in a way that was not it was a blinded, I believe, double blinded, and I'll link this in the show notes here. I love to go into the science because a lot of the anecdotal experiences can be just user identified. But when you look at true science blended with anecdotes, eventually the truth is going to start to bubble up. So this is really cool. The hypothalamus, the amygdala, from a science lens, how is this actually providing a space inside of ourselves that's very, very similar to MDMA?
I mean, MDMA, there is a huge cost. Everybody knows the feeling like the day after or 2 days after, you just feel that absolute crash. So I'd say that it's the fact that it's not just an SSRI. It's not just kind of really, really trenching all of your natural serotonin and pulling everything you have. It's that combination between the PDE4 inhibitor and those SSRI similar effects. I'm really glad you looked at the research there, because the research that we looked at, we were also in our formulations period. We looked at the clinical research that had been done on it, and we were just shocked, honestly, that we saw that that those effects are being so well documented. Because I've got a sheet to me here that I often use as like our cheat sheet. I can tell you that the company, I'm not going to use the name of the company, but it is one of the more well-known therapeutic Scaletium tortuosum suppliers. But this research that they did, when we're talking about Mesembrine, the amount that they actually used to get those results was 0.02 milligrams. That was the total amount of Mesembrine. And, when you're looking at our Kanna powder, we've got 1.5 milligrams. It is just like, it's just on a different level. And the Mesembrine product that I made, again, that's the lighter one that I recommended for the more therapeutic, everyday, maybe entry level use. Even that is 0.58 milligrams. So it is just so much higher. When we're looking at the Mesembrine, which is the more calming kind of side of it, in the research that company did to get those clinical results that you were just talking about, they were looking at 0.02 milligrams. 0.06 milligrams. Whereas in our powders, we've got 0.36 milligrams, and in the Mesembrine, we've got a little bit higher at 0.52. So it is, we're looking at tenfold increases even in our more gentle products. If we get to the stage now of doing some clinical trials of our own, we are building out our lab and we're building out our capabilities in that sense. I think it's going to be world changing when we actually are able to put our products through. The pharmacology of it is a little bit different from MDMA. It's I'd say the Mesembrine and the Mesembrine that we have in our Kanna it's really important that it's more kind of full spectrum as well. I think of all the natural alternatives that you have out there, this is the closest thing you can have to all the positive effects of MDMA. It is something that is going to be opening. It's going to be something that you can share with a loved one. It is something that's going to open up your emotions, make you change really change your perception of things. I really challenge anyone to try this and come out the other end, exactly the same as they were.
Yes. One thing that I really love too is when people say, well, what kind of drug is Kanna? It's not exactly a drug. It's a herbal remedy. That's essentially what this is. You could, if you wanted to, jump in a plane. You could fly to Africa. you could pick the Kanna yourself. You could try to formulate it, right? Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that because there's a safety protocol involved, and you have to go through many checks and whatnot. But it's so fascinating to me, Bandit, why people turn their cheek to natural herbal remedies that are so potent and so powerful and so healing. So when we look at the question of anxiety and depression, obviously you and I know there's a ton of reasons why anxiety and depression exist in the first place. But this natural herbal remedy, this bush that grows in Africa, how do you see this really impacting people from getting out of the past, rumination, depression, or getting out of the future, anxiety, fear, and just being here right now? Just being with themselves, especially right now with the turn of the year and the new year coming and the old year going away. How does this really help people be in the present moment and not be in the past or in the future?
I mean, I could talk about my first experience with Mesembrine, taking it, over 3 to 4 days. I just noticed there was this one point where I stood out on my balcony, it was rainy. I wasn't having the best day. And just all of a sudden, it just felt like I'd put on a pair of sunglasses, like literally the rose tinted glasses. I was viewing things in a different way. I was like, the sound of this rain is beautiful. I'm so lucky to be here. I was just in this state of mindfulness. And I think for so many people that mindfulness, that sense of appreciation, I think that can be really, emotionally shifting. I think it can really shift some people with long-term trauma, who maybe are not in the best places with their job, with their lifestyle. It's a tool. It's a tool. You need to do the work yourself. You need to, make sure you're taking, personal care. But this is a tool that's just going to add so much more to people's journey and to just living better.
It's a way that I was fascinated by in the research, that the Kanna naturally bolsters serotonin reuptake. But it's not like you're using a pharmacological agent where it's going to deplete the serotonin. And if you've ever experienced any of this from using illegal drugs, and I say illegal because I'm not condoning that anybody goes out and does MDMA, right? Or MDA, to each their own devices. And I have the courage to say on my show and to the public, like, those things can be incredibly healing, incredibly profound. But you can't do them every day. These things were not meant to be done, on your lunch break and then go back for your business meeting. So I think about the reuptake, the strengthening mechanisms of attention and memory, the boosting of the mood, promoting of the cognitive function, beyond the heart opening and really the tearing down of the walls that tends to separate us as we look at our wives, our husbands, our family members, all the ways that we disconnect from really ourselves, the love inside of ourselves. And we get blocked of seeing the love in the people that we actually love. And it's just this crazy cycle that we're all figuring out here on planet Earth. Beyond that, though, we've talked quite a bit about the emotional regulation and the emotional benefits of this. What about the neuroprotectant? What about the brain health aspects of Kanna? Have you studied that? And if so, what did you find?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of ingredients which say are neuroprotective. I wouldn't go so far. I don't want to oversell it. I want to make sure we're giving a really clear picture of what Kanna does. It's not so much a neuroprotective in itself, but it certainly just doesn't have that cost associated. Like I've tried a few days of the recreational dose, and the next day it was business as usual. There was I didn't feel any huge crash. So that's something that's really beneficial with it. I've also personally tested, taking Mesembrine, for example, which is a long-term formula for, 3 months at a time and coming off. I tend to, even though I really feel you could take this for a long period, for anything herbal, our bodies build up tolerances to everything. I always recommend, no matter what it is, go for 3 months, take a week off, come back into it. Just make sure you're always getting the best from it. So, there are other neuroprotective things out there, but I would definitely say that there are a lot of people using this for enhancing cognition as well.
I mean, going back to 1662 that's pretty old school. I mean, this is it's a plant medicine, but we can't call it a medicine because in the digital world or in the FDA's lens or the USDA's lens, if you call something a medicine, then it could be it could be confiscated, which is unfortunate. So we can't necessarily sit here on this podcast and say it's a medicine, or at least you can't, but I could. I could say that for me, this is a medicine. And I would say that for the handful of friends here that I've shared it with, that they feel it's a medicine too. And I was thinking about something we talked about earlier when we were talking about entheogens, right? And I had described on a previous podcast that an entheogen is a plant compound that gives you some different state of reality or an altered state of consciousness that doesn't always have to be psychedelic. Now, when I look at the definition online from Oxford, it says a chemical substance, typically of plant origin, that is ingested to produce a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And it specifically says for religious or spiritual purposes, which I think is interesting. If you look at the etymology and maybe why entheogen existed in the first place, there is a lot of talk about the stoned ape theory or the Amanita muscaria mushroom and the story of Santa Claus. There's also a lot of research about the mushrooms being in the Bible. And so I think that whether or not you're spiritual or scientific, everyone knows that there is something else out there that we don't understand. I call it God or Great Spirit. What are your beliefs about the spiritual quotient when it comes to what I would describe as a medicine like Kanna? In other words, do you feel this could bring people to a higher level of spiritual intelligence, to have a higher connection to the energy that's outside of them, that's loving and guiding them, and that loves and guides all things?
Among some of my friends, I'd be considered sort of a little bit more like research driven, very very much interested in clinical research, and that's what brought me to LiftMode, because that's what we're all about. But
yes.
I mean, if I looked at some of my more perhaps considered far out beliefs, for me, my belief is that, I think that there is so much that we are uncovering in nature. I think that for every ailment we have, I truly believe that there is something out there that we just haven't discovered yet. There's something there in botanicals and in nature that is going to be the key for sorting out our diseases, our ailments, our even psychological disorders. So like in a sense, I often I tell people, what if the cure to cancer is in the polar bear's gallbladder, and if they're gone, they're gone. So like that, it gives me a special kind of motivation to think about the environment as well, because we like to think that we have discovered all there is to know. We always have this kind of almost arrogance about it. We've come this far. We got smartphones. We got microchips. But it's we are still in an infantile stage of understanding of our environment, and I am just thrilled to see it continuing to develop. And I don't think if it wasn't for companies like us and people like you and people like your listeners, that I don't think there'd be that motivation to keep going. I think all of us as part of this industry, whether a consumer or a producer, we're driving towards improving humanity by continuing to explore. And sometimes that exploration is, it's within ourselves. It's finding what is it that's going to open us up? What is it that's going to improve, our ability to connect with each other? And I think that's incredibly important.
And as we connect with each other, we create more space for memories that matter, for experiences that matter. It's such a paradox, though. And I know I'm getting into the spiritual part of our teachings, which is really the pentagon of wellness that I've been talking about for years now: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial wellness. We signed up here to be on planet Earth this time, bandit. So we all have to fill those aspects of ourself. Otherwise, life gets harder, right? And so the question I've been wanting to ask you for quite some time, and also the question that I've been pondering since 2015 and probably way before then, is how do I live my life well? When we look at Kanna, and I can say this as a medicine because this is an anecdote, when I've been in different psychedelic ceremonies, Kanna was actually used as a precursor with some of these other entheogens. Now, I know Kanna itself is not a psychedelic, but there is some beautiful aspects of this that can allow us to create more space so that we can fill all those sides of the pentagon. So at the end of the day, we can live our life well. So how do you, Tobias, how do you live your life well? What does that even mean to you to have a life well lived? You know, this is the 500th episode on this podcast. And I think about me asking that question to 500 different human beings. I'm curious for you, what is your ingredient list when it comes to living your life well? How do you define wellness?
Geez, a big question, but I'm glad you asked it. Yeah, for me, wellness is just finding out what fills your cup, you know, and understanding that some of the habits, some of the easier ways to be are not always good for your health, not good for your mental health. So it's really about, for me, it's about discipline. It's about constant reflection on your behavior, your habits, you know, your weaknesses, your opportunities for improvement. And sometimes when you identify those, you think, okay, well, maybe I need to try something like Kanna, or I need to try Neurolift Balance or something. You know, maybe I'm lacking a little something there, and just keep experimenting, keep exploring, and finding what works for you, because a lot of wellness is going to come from inside as well. But you know, use the technology we have, use the research that we have out there, and there are things in there that are going to work a lot better for you than it's going to work for me. But wellness is, you know, for me, mindfulness and constant gratefulness, because I can get really sick and I can still consider myself to be emotionally well. You know, sometimes even in those hardships, it brings it more into perspective. At least I have this, you know, at least I know to take care of myself. At least I can make a little time. So I think of wellness in a really holistic sense. You know, it's not just not being sick, it's living your best, I think.
And I feel that on such a deep level as we say goodbye, because it has been an ongoing journey for me, for you, for all of us, to maintain these aspects of the Pentagon so that we can live well. And the things that we perceive to get in the way, it's usually our perception of what's happening that's way worse than the things that are actually happening. In other words, you know, I'm
it's the
sick,
lens you're
but
looking
also,
through.
right. In other words, I'm sick, but I'm also excited about being well. I'm sick, but I'm also excited about the way that my immune system can fight off invaders. I have a fever, but I'm so fortunate. I'm so happy that my body has this fail-safe system to get the bad stuff out so I can breathe in the good.
You got a fever, your body is working hard, you know, like that's it. It's all, yeah.
We covered a lot of ground. Is there anything you think we missed when we look at the anxiety, the depression, and some of these natural remedies that LiftMode stands for that can really support?
I mean, did we send you some of our Neurolift Balance? I think I might have included that.
I think so.
It out
Yes.
to you when you first reached out. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I mean that you know, we're here to talk about Kanna, but that's one of my babies. That is one of my proudest formulations. You know, for me, one of the things that really got me into this track of experimenting and finding what works for me is, you know, when I was a kid, I got an ADHD diagnosis, and you know, at that time, basically what happens is they just give you stimulants, they send you home, they tell your parents tell the school, and they're like, all right, okay, you know. And I kept that quiet for like 10 years because I had this sort of stigma that ADHD is just, you know, something that bad kids get, or they're not parented properly. It's just kind of a sticker you get. And I think it's amazing that in this day and age, you know, people are getting so much more advice and help about the other things that happen. It's not just an attentional thing. There are so many things, like you can have rejection sensitivity. It can affect your life in so many ways. And I found that, you know, I nothing wrong with medicating. There's a lot of good stimulant and non-stimulant options out there if you can get past the nausea and things like that. But for me, I did 10 years of looking at things like, okay, so tyrosine is going to help with my dopamine levels. You know, okay, there's two different kinds. We got N-acetyltyrosine as well. Both of them work incredibly well together. A little bit of you know, a little bit of phenylalanine as well is helping me with my cognition, with my memory. And I came to this I came to this perfect formulation, and I was dumping them in pouches of powders and like consuming them every day. And it was just like, I found this focus. I found this, it was so life-changing for me. And when I joined this company, I just felt absolutely blessed to be able to put that into a formula and put it out there. And, like I mentioned before, we can't say things like, this is for ADHD. We sold it as, this is a cognition enhancing, this is a calming agent. But, the day that I woke up and look on Reddit and see that somebody else had discovered this and said, I'm using this for ADHD, I've come off my medication, this is the best thing I've ever had. I was in tears. That is a beautiful thing as a formulator to find out. So, like whoever it is out there as well, that's one of my babies, the NeuroLift Balance. I think it's a fantastic product, and I hope you get a chance to use it. Even if you are, neurotypical, it is something that is just going to help with memory, concentration, focus, and just sort of that calm kind of mindfulness state. So yeah, just have a look at our catalog and have a look and know everything is, safety research is number one. And I think that's the only thing we miss. And I feel it's a little self-indulgent because it's my formula, but I'm glad to get to share that as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the discount code. You guys go to joshtred.com/LiftMode. Use the code JOSH10. Actually, if you go right now, I believe for just a limited time, like a very short window, you actually get 20% off. So you can use the code JOSH20. You get 20% off. So like holidays, New Year, even Valentine's Day that's coming, think about that. How can you do a N=1 experiment? 30, 60, 90 days of you really investing in your own mental health, your emotional health, by having a window that can actually give you a different barometer, a different baseline of how you actually should be feeling, instead of being pulled in the past by depression or pushed by fear into the future. So Bandit, thank you for coming on the podcast. Episode number 500. It was really incredible. I love the ways in which you shared about your own personal story, what brought you to these compounds. I call them medicines. You call them compounds. So thank you, man. Thank you for what you guys do, becoming one of our really trusted partners. I've taken these myself. I shared my journey on the podcast now. So we appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show. From my heart to yours. Thank you for coming on the show, the audience, the people that make this even possible, the people that for the past 500 episodes, 8 years now, that we've been having these incredible conversations that allow us to live life well. So until Bandit and I see you again, we're both wishing you love and wellness, and we'll see you for another 500 episodes. All right, y'all. Peace.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you love this video, hit subscribe. That way you'll be automatically notified when new videos come out, new episodes, and also share this video with a friend. If you loved it, they're gonna love it too. Check out some of the videos on this screen that are perfectly curated based on the video you just saw. Make sure you follow me, and I'll see you in the next video.